Oh, now we want to go down. So we're not.
So if everybody can mute, that would be really beneficial.
Do we move?
We could. Why don't I take us off?
It's recording.
Oh, here are the Taylors.
As we journey through life, we encounter many people. With some, we find kinship, and others we pass along the way. When we stop and really take a look at them, sometimes we discover something extraordinary. People trying to make a difference in the world. Not everyone is famous like Mother Teresa, MLK Jr., or JFK. But there are myriads of people who endeavor to create a better world. They toil endlessly, take on causes, and achieve common goals. Sometimes their individual contributions may not even be noticed. Yet, their invisible actions leave an indelible mark on humankind. When their deeds and actions are shared, all of us can be inspired. For these people, social justice and equality lie at the foundation of their actions. We too can be a part of the almost invisible movement bringing about hope and social change. So, what is social justice? It can be defined as equal access to wealth, opportunities, and privileges, and the principle that all individuals and groups are entitled to fair and impartial treatment. Equality and equal opportunity for all lies at its foundation. Let us get to know some people who have woven the pursuit of social justice into the fabric of their lives. Meet Kay and Clark Taylor, who celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary in 2018. They are both social justice activists and have been for most of their lives. Where did their interest in social justice come from?
My parents were active in the church. My dad was chair of the YMCA board, and we were just aware of other people, and my folks had a big group of friends, so we were part of a larger community of people. So that's kind of the foundation of it for me.
I really attribute my social justice orientation, aside from the influence of you, before that, to the church. I was very active in a church and went to summer camp and absorbed the Christian teachings of kindness and equality and being understanding of other people and listening to other people. And I think as I went off to college, that was the sort of person that I was looking toward marrying. And so we were able to find each other.
Kay was born in 1936 in Omaha, Nebraska, and Clark in 1934 in Chicago, Illinois. As a couple, their story begins when Kay and Clark met at DePaul University in 1955.
When I was a freshman in college, I heard about him. It was a fairly small college. He was in England for the year, but I knew that I would want to meet him. And so the beginning of my sophomore year, I met him, and I knew I was going to like him ahead of time, but I liked him then, but he had no interest.
How did you know ahead of time?
I don't know. But he had no interest in me whatsoever. So all year long, I plotted for different ways for me to be with him in one way or another, but nothing ever took. And at the end of my sophomore year and his senior year,
I was studying up in the belfry of the church, came down for a break, and here was Kay. And she said that she was going to be working in a mental hospital in Cleveland, of all places, for that summer. And I was just going to be digging ditches for the telephone company. So I said, let's write letters.
Kay and Clark connected throughout the summer. Letters flew back and forth between Cleveland and Chicago. At the end of the summer, Clark concocted a surprise visit to meet with Kay.
I drove down to Bloomington Normal. She lived in Normal. That was a twin city.
We had dinner with my parents, and my father had this thing where if somebody new came to the house, he would pass them in the butter and he'd stick their thumb in the butter. And so he did that to Clark, and Clark turned the butter plate over on his hand. And my father, who had never had that happen to him before, knew that he had met his match. 2 days later, I took him to meet my grandparents. My grandfather was in a wheelchair and had lost a leg due to diabetes, and he took one look at Clark and he said, "You can't marry her until she graduates." This was our second date. We both kind of knew right away.
As Grandpa predicted, Kay and Clark were married on August 16th, 1958, and as he requested, it was after Kay's graduation. Their wedding vows were exchanged at the Second Presbyterian Church in Bloomington, Illinois. The 50s were coming to a close. Peeping around the corner was the baby boomers' generation. The swinging 60s would bring about national and global transformation. These radical changes would seep into the lives of ordinary people, and Kay and Clark were no exception. Tumultuous times often challenge us to examine ourselves. In the next chapter of their lives, Kay and Clark had the chance to explore their marital and community roles.
It was in the middle of the Vietnam War. It was in the middle of the civil rights struggle. And it was also beginnings of the women's movement. And neither one of our mothers ever worked outside of the home, and I hadn't expected to either. I mean, that was the model that we had. All of us were influenced by the changes in the marriage contract, where the marriage contract when we got married was the man was going to support the family and the woman was going to stay home and have her dinner parties and take care of the children and take care of the home front. And that just all sort of collapsed with the idea that women could go out and have jobs and that men could help take care of children. And it was a very fertile time, which just happened to coincide with our own early development.
As they started their family, Clark also went back to school to become a minister. After graduation, he began preaching at a small church in Des Plaines, Illinois. It was at this time that his interests in racial justice started to take shape.
The thing that I got into doing, just as a result of reading what was going on in the world, was about racial justice. And I was in a small church, and I was talking about race issues more than the people of the church wished that I were doing. Mm-hmm. And so some of them left over that, but it was something that was dear to me.
The times that they lived in were filled with change, and all of these experiences helped to forge their destiny. In 1965, Kay and Clark moved to Peoria, Illinois.
I think one of the things that we did in the early years of our marriage, which sort of cemented our social justice orientation, was that when we had 2 young kids, we moved into an all-black community in Peoria, Illinois. Clark was working as a minister there. And so we were the only white family in an all-black community. And one of the first things that happened was that we had applied to adopt a 3rd child, and the social work agency said they wanted us to wait for a while to be sure that our family could adjust to living in an all-black community. So they went to school with our 1st grader and observed our family and made us wait for a year before they allowed us to adopt a third child. And also that our children were able to adjust with having all children of color as their friends. And I think living there and then realizing the impact it had on other people, how other people felt about that, was really important to me. Yeah. But another thing we did in Peoria was we went to a workshop where they encouraged us to project first 20 years out in our lives and then specifically 5 years out. Like, where do you want to be 5 years from now, and what are the steps that you need to take in order to get there? And on the basis of that, we decided that I needed to go back to graduate school, even though our youngest child was only about 3 months old at that time. And then I would work a little bit, and then I would be able to support the family while Clark went back to graduate school. And that 5-year plan during the years we were in Peoria made it possible for us to move here.
Earning your bread by the sweat of your brow.
Oh, right.
In 1972, they moved to Needham, Massachusetts. It was here that they planted their roots and raised their family. During this time, they wove the principles of their original 5-year plan into their lives.
My role here was to help plan a college at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And it was called the College of Public and Community Service. So we worked with community organizers and community leaders and all. We didn't have any grades, we didn't have any course credits, but people were able to be evaluated for their prior experiential learning, and all of our students were adults, so that they were in very interesting roles. And one of the most interesting parts of teaching there was having the students teach each other. You know, they had so much to offer in terms of their experience.
We had bought a house, and I was planning on staying home that year because our youngest was in kindergarten. And I had been working, pretty much full time for several years. That was in July. And by October, we had run out of money. We thought on his $14,000 a year salary that we were making more money than we'd ever made in our whole lives. And so I started looking for jobs as a school counselor, which was what my master's degree was in. A couple weeks later, I started work at the Pollard Middle School here in Needham. And so I was immediately active in Needham things and connected to Needham, while Clark was very much connected to Boston.
Just when they thought that their lives were settled, one phone call jolted them out of their suburban life. Kay and Clark were enjoying their careers and raising 3 beautiful children. After a decade in Needham, Clark took a trip that gave rise to a new passionate pursuit.
Clark had finished his doctoral dissertation and was teaching full-time, but still sort of looking around for a focus. And so he had a chance to go to Nicaragua during the early 1980s. And he came back from Nicaragua and he said, I'm going to spend the rest of my life dealing with the issues of the United States policy toward Central America. And then a year later, he had a chance to go to Guatemala.
Clark received a phone call from a colleague, Beatrice Mons, about a Mayan village, Santa Maria Ceja, located in the municipality of Ixcan, Guatemala.
There had been a civil war in Guatemala that was still going on, and we were going with delegations from the Congregational Church, where we built the base for the Guatemala Partnership, and had a tentative relationship with a village in Guatemala, Santa Maria Ceja.
In the late 1980s, as the villagers returned from Mexico, they identified the need for a structured educational system. Over the years, the Guatemala delegation came to meet this need.
Almost none of the parents had ever had any kind of education, even grade school, maybe just a couple of years, but a lot of them nothing at all. And now we look on it, and it's probably the most progressive village in all of Guatemala. It's made it possible for people in villages close by to Santa Maria to participate in some education.
This is a Mayan indigenous community where most of the parents have almost no education. Many of the parents can neither read nor write, and yet the next generation are going on to get college degrees.
I always thought that, well, if you work hard, I earned what I got because I worked hard at it. But in Santa Maria Zeja was the first time that I really saw that, wow, you can want to work hard and you can have ambition, but if you don't have opportunity, then, it's very hard to achieve your dreams.
Clark and Kay Taylor, both of them had such a gentle way, but at the same time, a very focused idea of what it was they wanted to do. It was very inspiring the way they let the people there make their decisions. So it wasn't like saying, you do this with what we give you. It was more like, we will give you this amount. How do you want to spend it?
There was a man said one day, we can't count on anybody else, but we can count on you because you always come. We can't count on the church. We can't count on the government. We're just here isolated in this remote part of Guatemala.
When we first went there, we told them that we'd come back. And then it turned out that for 14 years, Clark led the August delegations and I led the February delegations. And so it was a relentless part of our lives together.
One of the longtime delegates from Needham is Jeff Clausen. He went on his first trip to Santa Maria Zeja when he was still in high school.
Back in the 90s, it was difficult to get to the village. There was no electricity. There was no road to the village. So we'd spend multiple days traveling there. And this is before cell phones. And so no one really knew when we were showing up, but we would show up. And there'd always be this warm welcoming. And part of this warm welcoming was, because the partnership had been going on for a couple of years. And part of it was because how odd was it that we were just showing up in this village so remote, so far away. But there was always this sense of happiness and of this community coming together, these two communities on equal footing coming together. Growing up in Needham is a wealthy town just west of Boston, not that diverse. And then you go to Guatemala and you have, as your delegation leaders, you have Clark Taylor and Kay Taylor, and they radicalize you, right? And Clark was really good about engendering a sense of social justice in people who participated in the partnership. And he was really good about giving voice to someone who's just a kid, right? So I was 17 years old, 18 years old, but he would really talk to and listen and seek input from myself and other people who were my age. They were really always open to allowing us to participate as equals in these trips. And in doing so, it really gave me an opportunity to grow.
Brenda Metzler is one of the current co-leaders of the Guatemala Partnership and has been involved with planning the delegations for over 30 years.
I went on my first delegation with Kay in 1993 and have been involved ever since in a variety of roles, from fundraiser to delegation leader, treasurer, etc. I wanted to share one thing about an insight that a young psychology student who was a student at university in Guatemala that she shared with me. She said, I think the delegation has found its sense of purpose in its humanism and solidarity with Santa Maria Zeja. And I thought that was a very good observation. It's always been important for me to give back and to be of service and be involved and contribute in things beyond myself. It has given me a wonderful sense of purpose and a focus that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
Kay and Clark deeply valued their commitment to the community of Santa Maria Zeja. The expectation was that those who joined them on the delegations would also take this responsibility to heart. One such person was Scott Pike, an optometrist and optometric instructor who wanted to start an eye clinic in the Ixcan.
I had visited the Ixcan in Guatemala in 1996 and got the idea of a eye care project for the village. And when I went back, because I spoke no Spanish, I needed help. And I joined up, I got a hold of Clark, and he said, yeah, come along. And so I vividly remember, will never forget the weight of his arm on my shoulder when I met him at this little rural gravel airstrip. And he said, this is a great idea, but if you plan on just doing this for a year or two, forget it. These people deserve something that is long-term. And if you're going to do this, you got to be in it for the long run. And I could feel my brain trying to process all of this and plot my future out in about 2 seconds. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So my project has grown slowly over the years. We now serve the whole region of Ixcan.
One of the many reverberations of the Guatemala Partnership was summarized by rhetoric shared by Jeff.
I guess the joke would be like Clarked in the head, right? Like Clark had we did Clarked in the head. He had, torn off our cataracts, shown us the world, spun us around, and then on Monday we're back in school. It changed the trajectory of my life because when I came back from Guatemala, it was difficult to return to the world that I had known before.
Over the years, life-altering events have happened to both the people from Santa Maria Ceja and those from Needham who have taken the journey with Kay and Clark. One such person is Allie Durbin.
Kay and Clark Taylor started the Guatemala Partnership when I was a teenager, and they started recruiting people to travel on delegations to Santa Maria Ceja. I'm not sure if I convinced my dad to go or he convinced me, but we made the decision to join a delegation together and travel to Santa Maria Ceja on one of the early trips led by Kay, and it was a trip that changed my life. The very first time I went to Santa Maria Ceja and just seeing the difference in that community, but also the similarities that we have between people made me realize I need to delve in further. And so at that moment, I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but it started building in me. Okay, gotta go back, learn Spanish, have to return to Guatemala again and get more involved in the partnership. And then over the years, I came back for longer and longer periods of time, then came down to do volunteer work, and then eventually took a job here and moved here. So it was, in a way, it was gradual, but I think that first spark was really lit on that very first eye-opening experience in the community with Kay.
Prior to the arrival of the delegates of the Guatemala Partnership, Santa Maria Ceja had experienced a time of peace. Edwin Camille fondly remembers this time.
My earliest memories are of the forests, streams, rivers, birds, animals of the rainforest where I was born and where I grew up for the first 5 years of my life before the violence hit. In 1982, the Army came with force. Prior to that, they would show up in the community and talk to community leaders. Sometimes the soldiers would even play football with community members. But then, things started to change. First, they started kidnapping people. Then they started bombing the nearby communities. And they implemented what's known in Guatemala as a scorched earth practice, where they tried to eliminate entire communities.
A nearby village had lost all but 2 members in an army raid. The survivors warned the neighboring villages about the army's tactics. Everyone, including Edwin's family, fled into the forest.
Because the army didn't find anybody in the center of town, they started searching the forest. And on one of those search missions, they found my family and killed almost everybody.
Edwin was the only one to survive the attack. He was later found by his father and older brother. Together, they would flee as refugees to Mexico. After 12 years, he would return to Guatemala in 1994. 3 years later, Edwin met Allie in Santa Maria Ceja.
As a senior in high school, we all had to do an internship, and I did mine in Santa Maria Ceja. I returned to my community to give back, to serve, to support, and to teach. Allie was also there working with the schools. And so that's how we met. At that point, I didn't imagine that we were going to get married and have a family together. But over time, we got to know each other better and better. And now we have 2 children.
Years later,
human rights groups began to seek justice for many of those who had suffered the same fate as Edwin's friends and family. Efren Rios Montt was the military dictator who had ordered many of the massacres of the indigenous people. In 2013, he was brought to trial for his crimes. For the first time in world history, a former head of state was found guilty of genocide and crimes against humanity in a national court system of the country in which the crimes took place. Not everyone who has been part of the Guatemala Partnership is still as deeply connected as they once were. Other people have taken what they've learned and stitched it into their own quilt of life.
I'm the founder and executive director of Redgate Farm Education Center, which is an educational farm working with kids and connecting them to agriculture and finding a lot about themselves and building self-esteem and confidence. It's fair to say that a lot of my earlier experiences in life are what brought me here. My experience with the Congregational Church of Needham, in particular Kay and Clark with the Guatemala Project, was one of those significant moments for me. We had the opportunity to travel to a place that was very different from any of my other experiences. Kay and Clark, to me, was a relationship that developed over time, and I've really been in a large arc because I knew them when I was very young. I had an appreciation for them as being nice adults and people who treated me well. But as I've grown older and forged my own path in the world and raised a family, and I watched them perhaps with a little more distance because I'm not geographically or personally as connected to them. I also have grown a deeper sense of connection to them and appreciation for their social justice views and the long arc of their lives that has affected so many people and has had such an impact on the world and in a way that has continued to influence me in my work here at the farm.
I first went to Santa Maria Ceja when I was a junior in high school, and the first trip that I had was actually the first trip that was not led by Kay or Clark. So it was their first legacy trip. And that meant that the way that I was really introduced to the impact that Kay and Clark had was through the stories that community members were telling us. You know, every house that we went to, every person that we met with asked how were Doña Catarina and Don Clark. There had been this deep connection between the community members and those two, and it was clear that the care was really mutual. They had planted these seeds for trips to continue into the future, for solidarity to continue to build. Latin America had so much to teach us in terms of resilience and movement building, and in the face of, you know, oppression and imperialism. I was just deeply inspired by that. And after college, I moved to Guatemala. I worked with NISGUA, the Network in Solidarity with the People of Guatemala, which Kay and Clark had long been donors to, had helped found, that supports these international accompaniers to basically walk with survivors of genocide, to witness, you know, daily struggles they are facing for challenging the status quo. And that to me felt like a real pure use of privilege, a word that I think I learned from Kay and Clark, to be honest, and to use it for good. And now today I am the vice president of the Center for International Environmental Law. And what I think is inspiring to me is when I look back, one of the biggest things that I learned from Kay and Clark was to take the lead from directly impacted communities, that they know what their needs are, that they are the ones that can advocate best for their rights. And so, you know, the role of the international person, of the person from the outside, is to support, to listen, and then do whatever it is behind the scenes so that people can tell their own stories.
Maria Perez and Miguel Reyes share their insights of the Guatemala Partnership from their perspective as longtime residents of Santa Maria Ceja.
We returned to Mexico in 1988. At that time, the group from Needham had started visiting here. We were happy that they were coming because at that time we were very afraid. They asked us about our experience as refugees. They have given a lot of support to Santa Maria Ceja. They gave us a health post. We especially got to know Kay and Clark. That's how we became friends. Thanks to God, we are still alive. We have seen over time that they never abandon us. We always look forward to their visits, and we hope that they never forget us. We hope that they are doing well. They have supported us tremendously in Santa Maria Ceja. They collaborate with us. It's not easy for them to get here, but they never abandon us.
This partnership has brought much friendship, trust, and solidarity. The congregation has supported this community in different ways, including education, healthcare, and other community projects. I think we have been able to achieve this partnership thanks to our community organizing and the exchanges we've had together. If we hadn't been an organized community, maybe that trust wouldn't exist. Our mutual trust has been constant. For me, the impact of this partnership has been deep friendship, trust, and solidarity.
Over the years, many other personal journeys have been traveled, but not all of them could be shared. But rest assured, each person who connected with Kay and Clark has a story of their own to tell.
I always go back to where this all started, all the way back when Beatrice Mons contacted them on the phone and said, there's this village that I used to work with, could you join me? And he didn't say no, he took a leap of faith and he said yes. And that little step, everything flows from that little step. I mean, the whole trajectory, us having this conversation right now, is because he said yes, and he took that sort of leap of faith.
After 30 years, Kay and Clark felt that it was an appropriate time to step down from the leadership of the Guatemala Partnership. In 2017, they took what would probably be their last trip to Santa Maria Ceja to say farewell to their Guatemalan family.
We went with a delegation in February, and we told them that this would probably be the last time that the two of us would be able to come. I'm 80, Clark's 83, and we just felt like, we might be able to go again sometime, but the chances of our being able to do it, it's a difficult trip. We had an amazing love fest with them.
They had a party for us, for everybody on the delegation before we left. At the end of that, they said, well, we're going to have some dancing. So they got the marimba going, and the marimba is the national instrument of Guatemala. And the music was just so moving, but nobody was getting up to dance. So Kay said, well, let's us get up and dance. And then pretty soon, 3 little girls like this tall, I don't know how old they were, 6 or 8, came out and joined us. So then we did a little circle dance. And then people came out and started doing circle dancing. Then we got tired, the 2 of us, and we sat down, and these little kids, same sort of size, lined up in front of Kay and wanted to give her hugs. And some of them came by me for that as well. And there'd be a line there of 10 or 12 kids, and when they got up to the front and had their hug, then they go to the back of the line.
Though Kay and Clark are no longer leading the partnership, the work they started continues to this very day.
I was looking at a trip report from 1989, and he talks about, maybe we should just be giving up. Maybe this isn't working. What I like is that they continued to work on this, and we didn't really quit. And here we are 35 years later, continuing with this partnership. And what I also think is interesting looking back at those trip reports from 1989 is that I and Allie Durbin and others, we started this as kids, and here we are now at really what Clark and Kay's age is back then now. And my daughter, Jenna, and Allie's daughters have also gone to the village, and they're kind of like the next generation. So this continues to move forward, throughout the years, 30 plus years on.
Even as the Guatemala chapter of their lives came to a close, Kay and Clark continue to stay very active. Kay was one of the founders of the First Parish Needham Unitarian Universalists Positively Aging Program and the Memorial Garden Committee. Kay also remains very busy with her luscious garden at home. Clark wrote the book Return of Guatemala's Refugees. In it, he recounts the stories of those who survived the 1982 massacre. Later, Clark would also write a book about the development of schooling in Santa Maria Ceja, Seeds of Freedom, Liberating Education in Guatemala. He also founded and chaired the Needham Area Immigration Justice Task Force, amongst other pursuits. In 2019, Kay and Clark took a 2-week journey to immerse themselves in the culture of the Deep South. They also visited Selma and Birmingham, the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery to learn about the painful legacy of enslavement and the resiliency of Black people in America. At the age they are at, and with the physical barriers that they face, they are still out there, learning and participating. Nothing has been a deterrent for them. They have taken advantage of every opportunity to enrich their lives and the lives of others.
I think as we get older, we both realize our own mortality.
In the recent period, and particularly with the health issues that have come to the fore, we have just really gone at a whole different, deeper level of caring. And how many hugs do we have in a day? It's just been wonderfully rich in the little rituals and things that we've started. When I get up first, always, and when she gets up, you whistle, and I love you too.
And he fixes my coffee and heats up my heating pad and for me to sit on, and
your neck warmer.
My neck warmer. And then we have the chalice that we light every morning and start out the day in being thankful and try to have meaningful relationships every day with other people.
Yeah, remembering and just reminding ourselves what we're thankful for, and that sets a tone that we can try to make more constant through the day. It's not like we're anything like experts at it, but it's something that has really been enriching us in very profound ways.
My message to Kay and Clark would be certainly one of gratitude. I do think of them in my work and in my daily life, and I'm grateful to both of them for being a part of my life and helping me be a part of the course that I've taken. And I feel very good about that, and I'm glad to have met them.
You've really inspired me to be a better global citizen. You've modeled both humor and humility in a way that is inspiring, and I'm just so profoundly grateful for your impacts, big and small, and to be able to consider myself part of your lineage and your legacy.
Well, first we have Kay and Clark to thank for our union, our marriage, and our children. They opened our eyes and helped us see more of the world. They broadened our view and realized that our piece of the world is just that, it's one piece of the world. For me, Kay and Clark are guides, wise people. They have inspired so many people on the path to social justice. They encourage us to move out of our comfort zone and work truly for a better world.
While they may not know how much or how many lives they've affected, they have affected many lives, my life in particular, very deeply. And so I guess I'd want to say, thank you to them for being who they are, and for being so generous with their spirit, and for taking that phone call. Trying the Guatemala partnership, just being friends.
I thank you for the courage and vision that you had. It has evolved into such an amazing, broad partnership that has enriched the lives of so many people, on both sides of the partnership. We admire the way that you have a marriage of love and teamwork, and that has been a role model for many of us to aspire to. I really love you both so much.
The solutions to the problem in our world are personal. They can only be solved by each one of us doing what we can do in our own space. The drop they started in Santa Maria Ceja is showing wider and wider ripples in the pond we call Ixcan, Guatemala, Central America, and eventually the world. Thanks, Kay and Clark, for all that you've taught us by word and by deed. We'll keep the ripples moving on.